Tonight, I've been thinking a lot about what I wanted to do with the podcast over the last couple of weeks because we've had a couple of weeks. I don't remember our last episode. It was a few days, not a few days ago. It was a few weeks ago. Anyways, I've been thinking about what to do with the podcast because we're 13 episodes in, and it's the type of thing too where I know that podcasts tend to kind of evolve and change as they go along, and this one was no different. So I'm going to start doing some solo episodes on here, including guest episodes as well. So tonight will be the first solo episode, and I'm going to be going through and talking about my experience of my path and my healing and my journey when I kind of first started down the path of spirituality and started waking up in a sense. That's what tonight's going to be all about. Please continue to kind of hang out, chat it up in the chat. You can drop as many questions in there as you'd like, and I'll try to snag them as we go along. So when I think back to when I first started, and it's not that I hate this conversation. I don't hate this conversation at all. I hate the words that we try to use to describe the process of just like waking up. And truthfully, I really think that it's really a healing journey. The spiritual journey is really just a healing journey where you get to spots in life where things have to change because things aren't going well. And that's kind of what it was like for me. It was 2011, 2012. And it's not that life was like falling apart by any means, but it also wasn't, it's not to say it wasn't going great. It was just stressful. It was hard. I had a whole bunch of stuff that was going on at the same time, like all of us do always, right? But really what it was just a lot of seemingly like life catching up to me in a sense. And what happened was I started going to this share group. It was a group that met on Monday nights, and it was just a little small group of people that my mom found in the town that we were living in, this little local community. And it was a group of people that would get together every Monday night. And the woman that hosted it would just talk about and share all sorts of different ideas and concepts around not just spirituality, but energy healing and meditation and tarot reading and cards and just the whole nine yards. So we would go every Monday, and I had such a good time, like not just learning about things and tapping into things and experiencing things and all of that kind of stuff. But then at the same time, I was starting to really not just feel things myself, but have all sorts of different kind of those little spiritual experiences that you start to have when you wake up. So I started learning about energy and the way that we're all connected to it and the way that we can tap into it and the way that we can work with it. And then I would just experiment with that kind of stuff. In dreams, it happened a lot. I would get a lot of what I would call now as not necessarily astral traveling dreams, even though I had plenty of those, but a lot of dreams that were more lucid in nature and very much connected to other, whatever, entities, source, physical beings, who knows, whatever it was, right? Coming in and communicating information, sharing information with me. It just felt like a massive time period in my life where it was a continual process of getting like download after download after download of just stuff, just experiencing stuff. And when I say stuff, I mean like all the varied kind of like out of body experiences, deep experiences in meditation, a lot of energetic experiences. So my wife was also going to this group with me. We were going to it together and also experiencing a lot of the same things together at the same time and working with energy together with one another, as well as like having shared energetic experiences. It was just a lot. So many different things that it's like hard for me to go back and pinpoint and pick out. But it was a lot of just, when I say groundbreaking, it's not like, it was just all new stuff for me. But one of the really cool things about everything that I was learning was it really started to correlate and connect with my childhood and my past. And that's when I started to put a lot of pieces together between, a lot of what I was learning and experiencing in this space of like connecting with energy and working with like reading other people's energy and doing all of these other kind of things. It was just reminding me of things that I had already had massive experiences with when I was a kid, especially when it came to my imagination. And when I really started to bring awareness to how my imagination works and how I can connect in and see things through my imagination, and that it kind of works the same way that it does when I'm channeling or when I'm connecting, that awareness back in the beginning of my journey was huge for me. It unlocked like everything for me to where I was really connecting to childhood and the way that I would see things and experience things. And then I started to have a lot of like these experiences where you connect from what you would feel like would be present time and space to connecting with parts of you in the past and so much stuff. Also, at the same time that all of this was happening, so the woman that taught the or hosted the group, she also taught a specific type of energy healing called theta healing. It's an energy modality, just like Reiki, or there's so many different types of just ways to work with energy. And theta healing was the one that she preferred and the one that she was trained in and taught in and certified people in. And so me and my partner both went through the process of getting our theta healing certification, and we started using theta healing a lot. And I mean, I could go down a rabbit hole in regards to theta. I don't really look at what I'm doing today as using theta, even though the techniques are all the same to some extent. The process for like slowing down and connecting into consciousness and tapping in and getting still and working in that vibrational frequency, all of that stuff is really similar and pretty much the same for me. But I learned all of that stuff. So all of those things are happening in like normal everyday life, just kind of like going to this group, having a lot of really cool experiences, starting to meditate more and more, starting to figure out different things and understand different things, but also really starting to question things more and more as well. I have a background of, I didn't have a ton of religion growing up, even though I grew up in a small community that was, it was in Utah. I grew up in Utah. It's a small church, not a small church. It's a small community around the Mormon church. So it was a Mormon community, which meant everybody was Mormon. So I grew up in that religion and I was baptized in it and everything like that, but it didn't play a huge role in my life. Even though, come to find out later on in life, I still had a lot of programming that I had to unpack around religion. But when it came to like the spirituality component of it, it wasn't that big of a deal for me. I didn't struggle too much when it came to kind of like processing religion versus what I was experiencing. I didn't have to struggle with like separating from God as this and that and the other. I could just see it all real clearly as energy and as unconditional love, and just moved through life now with that as kind of the guiding, I guess, point in my life, the guiding factor in my life. And at the same time all of this was happening for me, I was also a police officer. So I had started my law enforcement career in a jail. I was a correctional officer at Salt Lake County Jail, and I spent 2 years working inside, meaning like in the correctional facility in jail with prisoners, whole 9 yards. It was an incredibly challenging job. It was incredibly hard. It was one of those jobs that I did not enjoy, just simply because of the environment of it all and being inside of jail for 12 hours. So I wanted to get out of jail and get onto the road. And eventually I was able to get hired on with an agency, and I went and became a police officer. Now I was out on the road being a police officer. And all of that stuff that I was experiencing, like on Monday nights and in meditation and working with energy and tapping into all of these different things, started to bleed over into my experiences when I was a cop. And it started to get really exciting and really, I don't want to say scary, because it's not like I didn't have scary experiences. I mean, when I think of scary experiences, I think of like the type of experiences that we would label as like scary, ghosty, kind of like spooky experiences. I didn't have any scary experiences like that. I had like real world scary experiences, a lot of experiences where there was a lot of fear involved, but not spooky experiences. But I did start to really use what I was learning and connecting with, like in everyday life as a police officer. One of my favorite things that I was able to do, and when I say I was able to do this, I think we can all do this. I don't think anybody has any magical special powers, except we all have magical special powers, right? What I was able to do was just kind of find people. And it was amazing to me because I would get on shift, and the previous shift had been dealing with somebody, and, you know, they were looking for this person, they couldn't find them. So they were just passing along information about who they were after. And I knew that I could just go out and find these people. And that's what I would do. I would just suddenly go out, and within a few hours, I would be able to find whoever it was that we needed to find. And it became a thing where I would literally just get in my car and start driving around and feel really pulled to go left or pulled to go right. And I didn't even question it. I was just like, now I'm going this way and now I'm going that way. Sometimes I would like flip around on Main Street and go in the opposite direction. It just never really mattered. But it always would take me to the point where this person that we were looking for would cross my path. They'd either drive by in a vehicle, or I would see them walking down the road or something like that. But it was to the point where it was really kind of consistent, where I knew if I could just go out and start looking, I would undoubtedly find people. So that was really cool. There was another moment where me and another officer, we were responding to this call where it was kind of a domestic situation that wasn't super domestic-y, meaning there wasn't a lot of, there wasn't something that had happened yet. There was just potential for something to happen. And when we showed up, the guy in the situation was really agitated and really worked up and really upset. And the other officer was talking to him and trying to calm him down. And I was just standing off to the side, kind of like observing everything and kind of hanging out, being there in case something did happen. And it was really cool because I just started to play around with the idea of I was going to try to influence the energy of the experience and the environment, because obviously you could feel the intensity of what he was feeling, and you could feel like everybody getting a little bit more amped up and worked up, and you could feel how this situation was heading in the direction that we didn't want it to head into. And all I did was I stood back and just kind of focused my energy and thought about the ability to just like slow down, calm this guy with my energy, relax the situation, because I didn't want anything to happen. And sure enough, he started to relax. He started to, and I didn't even say anything. Like I didn't talk. I didn't do anything. I just stood over in the corner and kind of opened up my hands and just started like moving and working with energy in the room. And he calmed down and relaxed, and we were able to kind of handle the situation, and nothing happened. And that was really, really amazing. I feel like I'm talking incredibly fast. I don't feel like I am. I know I am. It's because I'm nervous. It's so funny because I freaking come on here all the time. And for whatever reason, this just feels like it's a little bit different. And so I'm all nervous about it, but that's all good. So on top of those experiences, I also had a lot of experience with death. And I think that that was, well, I know that that was one of the biggest, like just not even impact for the job or impact for the experience itself, but really an impact for my life as a whole. And I don't think it's something that a lot of people think about when they think about cops or law enforcement. But the reality is that there's a lot of just regular death that kind of takes place in society, not necessarily the horrendous things that we all might think about or see on the news, but just regular stuff. People die all the time. And a lot of times police officers are responding to those calls. So I wasn't aware of that when I started. It wasn't something that I had really any information about. And I remember the first person I saw that had passed away was this, it was an elderly woman who passed away in her home. It was very like, she was on hospice, the whole 9 yards. And it was very just normal, fine. Everything was great about it. And then that was like one of the nicest experiences that I had. What followed after that over the course of my career was just a lot of, the hugest end of the spectrum, the widest range of the experience that you could possibly get. And I got to experience a lot of death really up close and personal on a regular basis. And at the same time, I was also connecting into those experiences energetically and being present in those experiences, not just from the perspective of like all the things that I needed to do as far as being there as a police officer and being there, maintaining the scene and all the stuff that I had to do for the job. But I was also there in this energetic way of showing up and connecting into the experience and just holding space energetically for what was taking place. And that was incredibly beautiful. I couldn't, I can't even really describe some of the experiences that I had. And there was a lot. There was a lot of people that, unfortunately, I was there when they were either had just taken their lives or right after the fact. And to be in those type of experiences, it just gave me a greater understanding of not just like humanity and us and people and mental and emotional health, but also the way energy works and the way it works in and around death and when people pass away. And it was really life-changing. And it was also incredibly hard for me. And on top of everything else that I was kind of like going through and navigating at the time in my life, that in and of itself was just an immense amount of emotional and mental toll that eventually started to kind of really truthfully, honestly break me down. And I was still having a lot of cool experiences, but I was also, it seemed like the negative experiences that I was having they were just continuing to compound and compound and compound. There was one really cool experience where, I mean, it's not cool because it's terrible around the circumstances, but there was a woman who had been killed earlier. I think it was 2011 or 2000. I think it was 2011. And that crime took place right before I had started or right after I had started. I don't remember which, but it was a big deal. Obviously, I wasn't involved with it in any way. Like I said, I think I had just barely started when it actually happened. But several years after the fact, when they hadn't solved it yet and they were still looking for somebody, I started to get all of these synchronistic things that popped up into my space around this woman and around that crime. And it started getting to the point where it was like, I couldn't deny the events that were kind of like happening. It's all those kind of synchronistic things that we've all had experiences with numbers and patterns and seeing things. And it all just started kind of syncing up and lining up for me. And it was really, really interesting. And then on top of it, I started looking into some of the, like the case files around the crime and having more things kind of connect and pop up. And all of this stuff eventually took me to, I went and met with the woman's friend who had come over to the house the morning that she had been murdered and ended up finding her body. And this woman was in the reports and everything like that, obviously, but nobody had ever really spoken with her other than just specifically, day of kind of stuff. And this was several years later. And that whole event was incredibly impactful for her, obviously, but it was like a real pivotal moment for her where her life started to shift in a different trajectory. And she went down a really kind of dark path and got really depressed. And her life was in a kind of really, really crappy spot. And I show up out of the blue one day. I went into work early and just went over to her house simply to just like show up and talk to her. And I ended up having a really beautiful conversation with her and got to listen to her story and her experience of what happened that day from her perspective and everything after the fact. And it was just this really beautiful, like full circle moment for me as well as for her, where it felt like the woman who had passed away specifically brought me into this situation in order to bring peace to this friend of hers who was struggling so much at this point in her life. So I felt really, really blessed to be a part of that experience. And I also think it had a factor in bringing, because the case had kind of gone cold. They had DNA, but they didn't have a match for any of the DNA. So there wasn't a lot of stuff going on with it anymore. And I feel like what happened was it wasn't long after that they ended up getting a DNA hit and were able to make an arrest in the case and everything like that. So that was a cool experience. But a lot of the stuff that I had during that time period, again, was just these really cool opportunities to like have real world, not applications, but like, it's one thing to be able to be like, oh yeah, we're all connected with energy. And then it's another thing to outright experience it. And that was really, really amazing. But eventually what happened was I ended up getting fired from that job, which put me on a whole other path and really set me into what I think is like the dark night of the soul. And that's another thing that I really wanted to talk about, because we talk about shadow all the time in here. And I think that had I not had all of those experiences, obviously, as a police officer, but also all of the spiritual aspects and the spiritual side of things that really kind of woke me up to these broader things, like it was incredibly hard for me to continue to do that job in the way that I was supposed to do that job, simply because I had so much more, not just compassion for people, but like awareness of how I felt like things worked, where it was like, it just didn't make sense anymore to be on that side of like the spectrum. I didn't want to play that game anymore of, law enforcement is such a game. But it did spark me into the space where I really had to start unpacking and addressing and looking at all of my stuff, because so much of it had really just been pushed down and buried. One of the other things that I got really good at from not even being a police officer, truth be told, I was really good at compartmentalizing and shoving things down for my whole life, for my childhood. But that process of compartmentalizing and shoving everything down and burying everything, eventually it all came up. And I had to start that process of really unpacking all of my shadow and all of my stuff and everything that I had gone through and experienced, not just as a police officer, because that was like very much just the tip of the iceberg, but it really started me on the path of exploring what had happened to me as a child, what had been going on my whole entire life, and really why I was the way that I was. And it was interesting because it took spirituality and it took like all the energy healing work that I was doing. And at the time when I got fired, I was already doing like events and fairs as a reader. And I was doing theta healing and working with people. So I just started doing more of that kind of stuff. But then life just got crazier and crazier to where everything just kind of like fell to the wayside, including like working with energy and working with people. And I still had like a connection, but I really had to start exploring my emotional health and my mental health. And that's what like the next 5 years looked like, was really diving in and exploring what it was to just tap in and feel emotions and connect to emotions and process those both in a visceral sense, like in a somatic sense, in a felt sense, as well as being able to talk and verbalize. And I did a lot of work in men's work, and I sat in a lot of groups with a lot of people and was able to process through a lot of different just emotional things and get what I think to be is kind of like a vocabulary for not just emotions, but how I experience emotions. And I think how a lot of us experience emotions. So that was incredibly impactful. Kind of what it feels like to me, and I bet there's a lot of people that can relate to this, where I had like this big spiritual experience, meaning like this awakening process, and you're cracking open and you're experiencing, and then it almost got put on hold because it, in some sense, all the other stuff that was bubbling up to the surface, I had to heal and navigate. And then once that stuff started getting healed, then here comes spirituality and energy and connection to source again, even more so. And that's really what this last, I say this last year simply because it's been the most like biggest catalyst moment, but also probably like the last 3 years of my life. After 2020, everything really started changing super significantly. I started going down the rabbit hole of therapy finally, and working with a therapist, and also did MDMA therapy, which was massively important. Started working with a bunch of psychedelics, and that I think was crucial to my healing and being able to get in and again dive deeper into the shadow and the healing, but also a lot of the repair I think that needed to be done neurologically with my brain because of trauma and complex PTSD and all of these kind of things that I had just really been surviving my whole entire life. I'm going to take a big, deep breath. Throw up some questions if you've got some questions. My most debilitating symptoms from CPTSD. I love that question, Spiritual Rambler. First, I want to kind of explain to you, and not explain to you, but I want to talk about, to me, from my experience, what CPTSD is for me. It's complex PTSD, so complex post-traumatic stress disorder. If we think about post-traumatic stress disorder, oftentimes people will think about, vets and people that have seen traumatic things and they've got PTSD from those experiences, and that's very much the case. But complex PTSD is often developed over the course of essentially being in dangerous environments, having a lot of consistent trauma, as well as neglect, as well as essentially just a lifetime of being in activated situations. And for me, the most debilitating issues that I dealt with were really mental and emotional health issues. I feel like I have struggled pretty much my entire life with depression and anxiety, yes, but for me, I feel like mine is much more kind of like, I'll just get really dark in my depression. And I know that it's connected to the CPTSD. And then all of the coping mechanisms that I have that I use to try to avoid and stay out of that depression or avoid some of the uncomfortable places that I'm getting into. All of those things, I think, were kind of the most debilitating aspect of CPTSD, at least for me. That would be great, Mark. Yeah, and I think a lot of us have, I don't like labels. I think that it keeps us stuck under, truthfully, a label. But I do think that a lot of us have complex PTSD. I think a lot of us have experienced enough things in our life that put us in those activated states chronically, consistently, over and over and over again. And it affects everything. A lot of times I'm talking about it through the lens of the nervous system and how our nervous system reacts and responds. But that same thing over an extended period of time impacts the way that you think, impacts your capacity to retain information, all sorts of different ways. It's just fascinating and sad. It's been one of those things that's taken me a long time to both understand as well as just make peace with. When I really started feeling things, that's when things started shifting for me. I think I had a certain level of I feel my emotions. I know how to feel emotions. But then I really started diving into deep emotional work and getting into some of the emotions that I hadn't been feeling. It became clear to me that what I was doing wasn't really feeling emotions. I would feel emotions to a certain degree and then check out of emotions, both good and bad ones. So really starting to explore what it felt like to sit in deep emotional experiences and ride those waves out, that was massive. That's when things really started to shift. Thank you, Prism. Hello, Daphne. What's up? I agree too, Spiritual Rambler. I think a lot of us are here to break those generational curses. How have my relationships shifted after therapy? Well, what therapy did for me, and I think therapy isn't for everyone, even though I think everyone would benefit for therapy. It's kind of like not everybody is, I think everybody needs it. Everybody would benefit from it, but it's not everybody's cup of tea, and I get that. But for me, the way that it changed my relationships is it gave me the ability to actually start showing up and being myself and taking responsibility for my actions. Prior to that, and I had therapy in my 20s, in my late 20s, I did some therapy, but it wasn't as extensive and as deep, and I really wasn't as prepared as I was in my 40s in 2020. And being able to just explore and go in and repair and understand and truthfully get for the first time in my whole entire life, what felt like all of the smoke cleared out of the room to where I could just see my life and see it for what it was and see myself in it. I think that all of that was not just the thing that unlocked it all, but suddenly it just gave me peace that I had been seeking. I always had this not underwhelming. I always had this thing in the background that was telling me that something, like that there was something wrong with me, that there was something wrong with me, that there was something wrong with me. And I kept looking for all the reasons or all the answers. And then when I finally just like, again, figured it out, changed everything. I was able to be accountable. I was able to show up better. I was able to communicate better. All of this stuff that I had been wanting to do, I just didn't have the capacity to do it. And yeah, it's been amazing. I highly recommend therapy. I don't have an emotional support animal, truly. That's not true. I guess our dog is kind of my emotion. She's the entire house's emotional support animal. Got this incredible dog that my son rescued last year and brought into our house, and she's a sweetheart, and she's very much like she's very much an emotional support animal. Right, Prism? She definitely changed a lot of things when she showed up. Breath's been a huge part of it, Mark. It's funny, I think, because we'll teach breath in here all the time, trying to get everybody to slow down with their breath. And what's interesting is I've had a journey with breath, kind of not my whole life, but when I was a police officer, I had to learn how to breathe in order to stay focused on what I was doing. Because obviously in some of those extremely high stress situations, what I used to do is I would chew gum. And so if I was driving somewhere, because there'd be plenty of times where it was like, responding to something that you knew was going to be an incredibly dangerous situation or a high stress situation. And I would throw gum in my mouth because I knew that if I was chewing gum, I would be breathing. And so I taught myself all of these little tricks to work with my nervous system so that when I was in really intense situations where I could almost feel it starting to shut down, I would force it to stay open and expand my awareness even more so that I could continually kind of stay in those situations. And breath was a huge component of that. And then later on, after I did therapy and did a whole bunch of healing and felt really, really, really good, I then found yoga. And yoga and becoming a yoga teacher and going through like this year-long yoga school training was just massive because I thought I understood breath. Turns out I kind of had like an elementary school understanding of breath. And that in and of itself, I felt like opened up so many other things because it opened up more space in my body. That's one thing that breath really has the capacity to do, is it quite literally expands and opens up your body, which is going to release and do all sorts of different things for all of those emotions that you have pent up in there. Yeah, Selena, lots of sound therapy. I've had a lot of we've gone to a lot of sound baths. I've had like one-on-one sound therapy sessions with people. I've tried a ton of different like energy healing modalities and all sorts of different things over the years. In between when I was a police officer and what I'm doing now, I installed float tanks. That was a crazy time period too. I got into that job because I was meditating and I was floating to try to have a deeper meditative experience. And if you've never heard of float tanks before, what it is it's a sensory deprivation tank that you get into with, it's got several hundred gallons of water and several thousand pounds of salt, usually upwards of 1,000 pounds of salt. So it creates this really perfect environment where you can just float. And the water is at skin temperature, so it kind of just puts you into this little cocooned place where there's no light and no sound, and you're floating, and it's amazing. So I started working for a company installing those all across the US and internationally up into Canada and Ireland. And that was interesting because I got to connect with a bunch of different people in the space of because floating is also really connected to meditation and to the psychedelic experience. And it's got a long history of cross kind of like pollination between a couple of different community spaces. So you get to meet a lot of really interesting people in the float space. But it's awesome. If anybody has floated before, or if you've got the opportunity to, I highly recommend it. It was in Utah, healing empathy. So I live in Tennessee now. But yeah, I was originally from Utah, born and raised in Utah. I wouldn't mind actually floating again. I bet there's probably some here in Tennessee. I haven't looked. I haven't floated in years and years. Yeah, truly, it is tough. There's a lot of judgment out in Utah for sure. It's an interesting place. I liked it out there, though. It was nice. The cards are interesting, Mark. It's one of those things that kind of came out of nowhere. At the end of last year, I've told this story a bunch of different times. I can tell it again. It was towards the end of last year. It was going into December of last year. I was getting really depressed again. I very much have a cycle that I go through. And it's one that I've been able to track and recognize and see. And I usually go into these periods of, it's not just seasonal depression, but that is what it is to some extent, but it's pretty extreme. And over the years, depending upon where I'm at in life, I've had real severe drops and crazy things that happened during those time periods. And anyways, leading up to that time period last year, in December, things were getting pretty crappy for me. And I was getting really depressed. Things in life were it was just a really difficult time period all around. And I had like a series of experiences where people would come through and connect and communicate. Also, at the same time, I was listening to the telepathy tapes. I talk about the telepathy tapes all the time. And I feel like that played a massive role in just reawakening me almost from back in the day when I first got into the space of connection with Source, because it reminded me of all of those things again. It reminded me of all of that amazing stuff that I have access to and that I've experienced. And it was just like, oh yeah. And then it framed everything up in such a new way as well. So I was having all of these just incredible kind of like areas of my mind reawakened and reopened. And towards the end of the year, I had some of these like incredible experiences where it felt like I was tapping into that telepathic consciousness space and being able to communicate and hear and receive and just be in that space. And then I had this, I don't even know what we want to call it, because it wasn't an out of body experience. Because I've had these experiences before. I've had many of these experiences before where I'll be asleep. It's during the night when I'm asleep. It's not a dream. I'm awake, and then I feel and connect to different energies in the room with me or wherever it is that I'm at. And what happened was I had one of these experiences where I wake up and I'm laying in bed, and at the feet of my bed is this really tall figure. And it was significant, like super tall. And next to me, I could see two other figures on each side. So I was surrounded on each side by these dark figures. The ones on my side, I couldn't see any kind of shape to them at all. They were just those kind of dark entity kind of energies. I don't know if anybody else has ever experienced stuff like this before. I was in that sleep paralysis state as well, where I couldn't move, but I could very much be in communication with what was going on and what was happening. And the one that was at my feet was very clear that they were doing something, that they were doing some sort of ceremony or something. I have no idea what they were doing, but they also were really, really big, and they kind of got bigger and taller. And eventually it came, like I could tell that they had on this big like headdress almost. And I got clearer visions and images of this entity thing, whatever, at my feet. And as I woke up the next morning and I'm recounting it and re-experiencing it, the thing that comes through, like quite literally, I'm just like trying to describe what this, I say person, but they're not a person. I was trying to describe what they were. And the words that came out of me were blue Mexican moon goddess. There was like blue moon goddess. It was a series of words. It was like, but it wasn't Mexican. And then suddenly it like clicked that it was like Aztec and Mayan, like the headdress that this deity, this entity, this energy had on. So it was this whole cool, amazing experience. And I start Googling, and that's how I came across this Aztec moon goddess called Coyoxauhqui, and went down the rabbit hole of learning all about her and the mythology around her and the Aztecs. And she's this incredible figure in regards to like shadow work. And I have so much connection with the moon. Like I've had other lunar goddesses, entities, energies come to me in the past as well. Like this is, so it wasn't new, although it was new. And I hadn't had one of those experiences in like over a decade. So it was really, really impactful and significant. And what led up, or what followed after that experience, was what felt like 2 weeks of just being on this incredibly high vibration of everything. And I felt like I was really tapped in and connected. I was seeing everything really, really clearly. I had access to what felt like massive information. I started to like channel and connect with Koi almost every night when I would go to bed, and I was getting stuff during the day. So a lot of really cool stuff was happening. And that's how I ended up coming on TikTok. I started the account back in March of this year, just as, because it kind of felt like what I was supposed to be doing. On my birthday's in March 2nd. And on my birthday, I hosted a small little group on Zoom with just some friends that I felt comfortable with, that I wanted to channel for. And so I put together this little call and sent out these links to a handful of people, and then just showed up and started channeling and seeing what it would feel like to do it with people. And it felt great, and it was cool. And I did that for like the month of March. I think I did 2 or 3, maybe 4 of those, and came on TikTok and started sharing content and just some of my videos around what it is that I do, not what I do, but just some of the things that have helped me on my path and all of those kind of things. And then in May, I had another one of those experiences with Koi where I went to bed, had awareness of being awake at some point and in communication, and very clearly just saw it laid out where it was like, go on TikTok, use the cards, read them, do it live. Like it just gave me all this information about what to do on here. And I thought, well, this sounds great. I love where you're going. And then it was like, yeah, you can read your playing cards. Because I didn't have a connection to cards prior to that. I've never read tarot cards. When I say we, my partner and I, she's got a lot of oracle cards, angel cards, those kind of decks of cards. So I'll play around with those kind of cards, but I've never really read them for other people. And as far as playing cards go, I knew that like in the recesses of my mind, I think I remember hearing something about people reading playing cards like back in the day, but it wasn't something that I ever really thought about or was even looking at. And then when they gave me all of this information about coming on TikTok and doing it, it also gave me all the information around what the cards meant. Because I thought, well, that sounds like a great idea. I'd love to go on TikTok and read my playing cards, but I don't have any idea what they mean. And then they just outlined it. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. And then I just came on and started doing it over and over and over again. I was totally scared, Dan. Yeah, I think a lot of the spiritual experiences that we have can be scary. I know mine have been. Daphne, it feels like Koi's been with me for a long time. Yeah, it feels like this is just finally them making themselves known, because I can see correlation and connection as I look back and see all the different ways that I've been connected with them for a really, really long time. I haven't ever done a proper sweat lodge, Steffi, like in ceremony or anything like that, but I've done a lot of work with sweating, if that makes sense. Like in saunas and like deliberate conscious work in conjunction with like that as a practice of releasing. But I would like definitely put it on my list of things that I want to do is like a real good proper sweat lodge in ceremony. I think that would be amazing. I'm usually down to try everything. I think that there's benefits to all of it. Is there another name for the isness? Boy, Timu, what are we talking about? What's the isness? Are we talking about consciousness? Source? Is that what we're talking about? If that's what you're talking about, I think there's lots of other names. Yeah, Steffi, I think they would be amazing. What else? Anybody else have any questions that they'd like to fire away? Next week, next week is Halloween, and Marcus is coming back on the podcast. So we're going to do another episode with Marcus next week on Friday, which is Halloween. Also, if you watch this, we're going to put the podcast up, yes, on YouTube, but it's going to go up on all the other places that podcasts are available as well. So soon you'll be able to listen to the Deep Blue everywhere that you can find podcasts. So I'm excited about that. Dan asks, what do you do to channel? What do you do to channel? I think the process is the same, even though we all get there differently. And essentially what I think you have to do is just get real silent and still and connected to yourself. So that however that works for people, right? And what I mean by that is, think about it this way, where you're a avatar full of things and receptors in order to receive information. You're just computing and not computing, you're receiving and interpreting information all the time with the avatar, with the senses, including source information, frequency, and vibration. So all we're doing is being able to quiet down enough of the chatter inside of the mind and bring awareness inside, so that you can then use that awareness inside to then externally connect outside. And the truth of it is, that's kind of what it feels like, but I think it's all internal. I think it's just the illusion that somehow we're then connecting to some source externally. Because I think when we feel that quiet stillness, when we're connected inside, I think that's the spot of actually being connected into consciousness, back into that sweet little singular place, that quiet little peaceful spot. I think that's when we're connected. Once we get to that quiet, peaceful spot, then oftentimes you'll have a physical sensation in your body of either getting information, like you'll have sometimes like a real physical feeling of like, I'm feeling energy coming into my body, or I'm feeling energy leaving my body. I think that sensation is, again, just kind of the illusion. I think it's always just the internal process of going quiet inside. But again, that's different for everybody. But the important part, I think, is really getting to that quiet spot where you're able to just go quiet and rest and then stay there. Now, the important part is you have to be able to stay in that quiet, restful, peaceful spot, but then also open up to receive. That's the spot where you have to be able to do two things at the same time. That's why meditation is really, really helpful for getting you to the spot where you're able to just quiet, but then you also have to be able to connect and tap into your other senses and your other abilities. Trying to think of the funniest stuff I've ever seen or experienced. I don't know if anything comes to the forefront of my mind, Sherry. It's always wacky. Like some of the stuff that comes through, it's always just like, yeah, it boggles my mind. Marlene, is enlightenment the same for everyone? And is there ever a ceiling of growth? I love that question. And I don't think enlightenment is the same for everyone. I don't think it's the same for any of us. I think it's different for every single person. And I think it's all based upon your lived experiences and what you're creating. So your path to wherever it is that you're going is going to be very unique to just you and you alone. just like my path to wherever it is that I'm going is going to be unique to me and me, right? So I think it's different for everybody. And I also don't think there is a ceiling of growth. I don't think there's a spot that we get to. I think there's always more. But even in the always being more indicates that we're always having to, like, that's the illusion part, like that there is some sort of like ceiling of growth, or that there's more. Like there's no more because we're already there. That's the part that I think we get confused around, is how can you evolve more than being already it? You're already it. You're a piece of consciousness just experiencing itself, like you already made it. So the idea that there's some like ceiling or level that we're getting to, I think it's just the illusion. Can you explain how to get to that peaceful spot? Again, breath for me is the biggest component to that. I think when we're really, truly able to just use breath consciously, people, even like I still don't like to do breath work a lot of times. I'm like, yeah. I don't want to do it. Like I still come to this space begrudgingly sometimes. But just the act of literally slowing down and paying attention to your breath to the best of your ability with as much awareness as you possibly can. What that feels like for me a lot of times is I feel like I'm giving it about 75%. And then the other 25% is still up in my head, just going crazy, trying to go back to your breath, go back to your breath. And I'm like, what about this? What about this? What about this? But if I keep practicing it and keep practicing it and keep practicing it and keep practicing it and find the ways that work for you, don't just think, well, I can't do this one thing, so breath work isn't for me. There's so many different styles, so many different avenues, so many different ways to tap into it. And I think it's the easiest, it's the freest, it's never going to cost you anything, and it will take you into that quiet, slow down, sweet spot the fastest, I think, before anything else. So I always just come back to the breath, and I'm always holding my breath in some capacity. So I'm always exhaling first. I want to push air out before I breathe air in. Push air out before I breathe air in. These are great questions, everybody. Right? It's so funny. We know the breath works and then we still resist it. I think it cracks me up. I love how we do that. That's that whole thing of like just not taking your own advice. You know it works and you don't do it. How many times is that the case with quite literally everything that we do? We know it works and then we don't do it. And then we eventually do it, or we find something else that we figured will work better. But it's like, just do the thing already. I think about that so many times where if I would have just done the thing that I knew I was supposed to do, how much further along in life I would be. And yet, I think we're always right where we're supposed to be, of course, right? Yeah, it's so hard to put yourself there. And that's the other thing, is sometimes I'm not, right? Sometimes I'm not able to slow down. The goal is to get to that quiet spot, but it doesn't always happen. No, Janie, I don't feel completely drained after doing readings anymore. I used to. When I first started, and like back in the day when I was doing in-person events and fairs and festivals and things like that, I used to get really drained and worn out. And if I go several days, I will. I have to be real mindful. But I don't think it's anything other than just like, I mean, it's like anything else that we do that takes our time and our energy. You know, we can burn out on it. So we have to be mindful of it. Yeah, right, Dan? I think that's a super, super important part as well. Oh, Jamie, I'm glad you're here too. Sorry, it's been a rough day for you. Some of my most beautiful experiences or memories from connecting were truthfully just kind of my own individual experiences that I've had in that space. I think that my own when I say my own visualization process, so like when we slow down and, you know, say, for example, we were to sit here and do a guided meditation and everybody just starts visualizing things inside of your head, that's the same thing. That's what's happening when you're connecting into source. That's what's happening when you're dreaming. It's the same thing. And so my visualizations, my imaginations, the things that I experience are also beautiful. They're so amazing. And I love being able to just like kind of be in them sometimes, if that makes sense. It's always cool too. I wish I could remember some real, like, I don't remember a lot of the stuff that I get when I'm reading for people. There's some highlights that kind of stick out, but nothing's coming to my mind right now. What techniques do you use to ground, protect, and cleanse? Mark, this has looked different for me over the years. I look at it now from the lens and perspective of what I'm usually prioritizing is just my nervous system and my body. I'm not too concerned about having some sort of like energetic cleanse or protection, only because I don't create that in my reality, meaning I really believe that we are creating our reality. And so there's no part of me connecting into energy that is dangerous or something that I would need to protect myself from. It's just unconditional love. But I do see the physical avatar part of my nervous system getting drained. I mean, it is very much a thing of being in energy and working with energy and exposed to it in a sense and kind of in the wave of it. So it's more of like, how can I make sure to ground my physical body? I spend a lot of time outside before and after I get on calls. A lot of times I'm going outside, just all of these kind of things that I'm going to do for my body anyways, but I bring more awareness to them. And it seems to help a lot. I have all of my little, I don't have, oh, they're over there. I was going to say I was going to get all my crystals and rocks and stones and things like that. All of those things I think are ritualistic things that help me feel better in the space, help me feel grounded and connected in the space, help me create the right environment for myself. That's what I think is massively important. And I would encourage people to look for those things. And that's, I think, a lot of what ceremony and a lot of what ritual practice looks like. And I think that the reason it's implemented like that is because it gives meaning to the experience so that the experience has more meaning to the person. And I'm not saying that like it's making it more real, even though it does make it more real. It's like my necklace is a great example, right? I wear my necklace when I channel, my never-ending story necklace, because that makes me feel magical. And I 100% believe that because that makes me feel magical, then I'm magical. So I think that that's important, is figuring out what you need in order to feel good about what you're doing and how you do it. And then turn those into your practices and turn those into your rituals and turn that into the stuff that you do in order to help you connect and what helps you feel good about connection. And then I don't think it hurts to get ideas, obviously, from other people and reminders and stuff like that from other people, but be mindful to not get caught up in thinking that somebody else's way is the correct way and what you're doing is the incorrect way. I don't think that's the case. I think however you do it is important because that's how you do it. Yeah, right, Mark? It is all about believing. It's all about believing. You have got to believe it. You have to believe it, and then you see it. It's not seeing as believing. You believe it first, and then you see it. Oh my goodness, Ola, but what if I lost that necklace, right? I love that. What if I did lose that necklace? I guess we'll just have to find out if that ever happens, Ola. I don't have an answer for that because I haven't crossed that spot yet. Who knows? I don't have any plans to lose it, though. Yeah, Marlene, after meditation, I have experienced those Kundalini shifts. They don't happen often for me, but I have experienced them. I don't know if anybody's ever experienced that or tapped into that Kundalini energy in your body. It's a yogic term. It's not just a yogic term, but it's that life force energy that can get really not just fired up and lit up in your body, but it quite literally like energizes you in a way that it's hard to explain if you haven't experienced it. Do I see Jesus sometimes truly? I don't see what I feel would be Jesus. I think for me, Jesus is more of an energy than an avatar. And I feel like at the end of the day, it's just unconditional love. So I definitely have tapped in and felt like what would feel like that. Or there's a part of me that might label it or say it or, classify it as Jesus. But I don't think of things that way. Right, Sherry, the love and the connection. I think I'll just speak for myself. I have a lot of programs around Jesus. Yes, they're religious based. Yes, all of those things, but just all the programming that goes into that character, that archetype, that person, that thing, that just the role, the archetype of Jesus. There's so much programming that we all have around that. And that I think is important to understand and look at. And I've spent a lot of time kind of unpacking that and looking at that and figuring out what that really is for me. And what's important to me now is kind of what Sherry talked about, is like the energy or just the presence of that feeling that I've tapped into and felt a lot, but I don't look at it as Jesus. It does feel more divinely masculine, though. You're right, Sherry. I would agree with that. Dan, the stones I collected from the sea in Greece, can they be an energy field? I think, heck yeah, they can, Dan. Look, you're not going to, I might be the wrong person to ask that question. I think they can. And I think it's really up to you what you want them to be. But in my opinion, if it comes from the ocean, you're in luck. That's the way to go. Already going to have amazing, amazing energy. Truly, that's amazing. You had an NDE and saw him. That's incredible. Oh, you're totally cool. No, it's all good. This has been fun. I actually have to jump off, but I appreciate everybody. Thank you for showing up tonight. Catch this episode over on YouTube, and the full podcast episodes are going to be up everywhere you can find podcasts soon as well. So you'll be able to subscribe to the Deep Blue all over the place. We also have a sponsor for the podcast I'm super excited about. So if you go to the link in my bio, you can click on it there. It's Woolly. It's merino wool clothing, underwear, boxers, t-shirts, whole 9 yards. Promo code BLUE. So go check that out. And yeah, I don't know. We're going to keep evolving and growing and expanding. And I love bringing it all and sharing it all with you guys. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. Friday nights, catch us live on TikTok. Come join in on the conversation. We'll see everybody later. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, click the notifications, and check out some of these clips right here. And don't forget to join us live every Friday night on TikTok.